please put your hands together for Mr. Andy Torbet.
Thank you very much. I should just first point out that the picture you just saw earlier was of my wife. I'm not some weirdo who has, like, dodgy pictures up on his computer. That is actually my missus. So, as we understand, I've been fortunate enough to make a living from diving over the last few years. Initially, I was a diver in the forces, and then I did a lot of scientific exploration diving, and then started doing safety diving work for TV and films and stunt work and that sort of stuff. And then the last sort of 7 or 8 years have been in front of camera. And a lot of that has been underwater, because although I do the other things that Miranda mentioned, diving is what I do most of, and diving is what I do best. So this morning, I just want to go through some of the highlights of the last few years of some of the underwater sort of adventures I've been lucky enough to get involved in whilst filming. I'm going to start with one of the most recent exploits, which is Beyond Bionic, which was my first foray into children's TV. It was for CBBC. And the premise of the series was looking at like a really cool animal, an animal with a really spectacular ability, and then seeing if we could match that, I could match that using science and engineering and technology. So it was part of wildlife documentary, part STEM. So it was great for kids because we could talk about fairly dry subjects like the coefficient of drag or gravity or acceleration or the physics of that sort of stuff, but do it in a way that was quite fun and interesting by basically throwing me out of an airplane at 15,000 feet. Now, I was the associate producer on this, and the series was my idea, so unsurprisingly, a lot of the episodes that I pitched were underwater. So the first one was this. This is the Japanese giant spider crab, the biggest crab in the world, and it is fairly enormous. It looks actually morphologically, it looks just like the spider crabs we see around the British coastline, but just much bigger. The carapace is kind of this size, and the legs, tip to tip, can be sort of 10 feet, 3 meters or more. Big animals, and they live off the coast of Japan. Unsurprisingly, between sort of 300 and 500 meters of depth. That's the sort of depth range, which clearly is pretty deep for a diver. And the challenge was, could I dive that deep? So the first thing you've got to deal with is explain to the viewer, and this is not just a problem we face when talking to children, it's the general public. You have to explain why diving deep is problematic. Now, as divers, and I'm going to assume most of the people in the audience either divers or at least have a knowledge of diving, things like Boyle's Law is kind of second nature to us, right? We instinctively know, right? You go at 10 meters, that's 2 bar, 20 meters, that's 3 bar, we get all that sort of stuff. You forget the general public and children who aren't divers, this is mind-blowing concepts, how pressure works, and why if we go to 100 meters, we aren't like flat as pancakes. So you have to explain first how going down creates more pressure around your body, and the easiest way to do that is visually, and it's the old classic sort of, probably some cliched, taking a plastic bottle down, and we did this in Y40, which is a 40-meter deep swimming pool out in northern Italy. Very nice. It's like 32 degrees. It's fed by natural thermal springs. It's very nice. But and that explains to them as you go down, the bottle gets crushed, and as you ascend, it then expands out again. You've also got to explain about why we do decompression. And the best way to do that, again, I'm sure some of the instructors amongst you will have used this in the past, is the old Coca-Cola bottle. And you shake that Coca-Cola bottle up, and that's like going for a deep dive. And if you slowly take the top off, those bubbles come out of the solution, all very calmly and controlled, and that's good, and that's what happens when we do decompression. Whereas if you fire the top off, it just explodes out the bottle, and that's what happens to your body and your tissues if you don't do deco. So with those problems sort of explained, we then look at what sort of technology I could use to try and match the giant spider crab. And I'll be honest, this episode was my idea, and it was pretty much motivated because I've always wanted to train in this piece of equipment. This is very cool bit of kit. This is the OceanWorks hard suit. It's one of two. The other ADS suit that's quite famous is the Nutco exosuit. But these are ADS suits, atmospheric diving suits. These are phenomenal, and they look like armored spacesuits. So obviously, on the 3 days of filming in Vancouver, the phrase "to infinity and beyond" was used an awful lot. Couldn't use it on the CBBC series because copyrights and Disney Pixar have got some very expensive lawyers to hand, so we couldn't actually use that. None of it in that made the edit. But I got a chance to dive this phenomenal bit of kit. Now, what it is effectively is a it's a wearable submarine. You don't really dive it, you pilot it, and how you pilot it actually takes a lot of getting used to, because if you imagine it all operates by your feet. So you're on pedals, and the pedals are basically on a pin, so they can rotate, in all planes. And you do sort of right toes to go forward, left toes to go down, left heel to go up, right heel to go backwards, and you actually pivot your instep to sort of turn that way, or spin kind of in a circle. It takes a lot getting used to, and needless to say, I smashed into the walls of this very expensive training tank a lot. The best thing about this piece of equipment is that you are held at 1 atmosphere, a surface, at 1 bar the whole time. So this can go to 600 meters. And you can do 12 hours at 600 meters, and that's impressive. But even more impressive thing is that, because I'm sometimes asked about what's one of the key assets that you should have as a deep technical diver, and it's this, boredom threshold. Because you will spend most of your diving life hanging at 6 meters for hours and hours and hours. This thing, you can do 600 meters for 12 hours, and there is no deco, because the entire time you're at 1 bar. You can just come straight back to the surface in about 2 minutes, have a cup of tea, jump back in the suit, and go back to 600 meters. Fantastic. Now, obviously, the downside is it costs millions and millions of pounds to buy one of these. So, we had this suit for 3 days out in Vancouver. Phenomenal piece of technology, and what I used it for was releasing plastic crabs from fake pirate chests. That, ladies and gentlemen, has been a kids' TV presenter, I'm afraid. Now, the other animal we looked at was obviously sharks, because everyone, especially kids, love sharks. So I was given the chance to go free diving off the Californian coast with the fastest shark in the world. This is the short fin Mako. But we weren't just looking at the speed of the shark, we were looking at its breaching capabilities. The fact that it's been recorded at leaping out of the water to 9 meters. And it's probably, when scientists aren't looking, doing a lot more. So we had to try and get me to kind of leap out of the water to try and hit 10 meters and beat the Mako shark. So we started off using this nightmare piece. So what this actually is, it's effectively a surfboard or like a snowboard with a jet propulsion, and you would stand on it and you kind of surf around the surface of the water. Great. But we needed to go vertical, so we found the best way of doing that was actually to kind of sit on it like a Harry Potter broomstick and try and kind of ride it straight up. And we got close. We got to probably 7 or 8 meters high. The problem was you get to a certain point, and to get any more lift, you need to go more vertical. But the angle of the actual kind of jet, it then kicks back at you. So you end up falling backwards about an 8-meter drop headfirst into the sea. But worse than just gravity, the jet's still running, so it drives you back into the ocean with even more force. I had cuts in my feet, I had cuts in my arms, I had like a black eye. But at the end of this filming day, I crawled out of the ocean, my hands and knees, a broken man, and still didn't match the Mako shark. We were at Y40 again, doing some more filming for the shark episode, and this time we were using DPVs, various scooters like the Sea Bobs and the big DPVs. We also got a chance to use these as a sort of prototype bit of kit that's been designed by a couple of guys from the UK. And it is just in its kind of prototype stages, but as you can see, it's basically 2 mini DPVs, 2 mini scooters that you strap to your forearms, and it is such fun. It is a phenomenal bit of kit for fun. And I was zipping around the pool, flying like that way, and you'd fly up. So it came to doing the actual filming of the breach, and the idea was that we would, I had my cameraman who's on scuba gear, and we'd free dive down, or I'd free dive down to the 20-meter platform, and I'd kind of stand in the bottom like that. I'd get the scooters ready. I'd give them the nod, hit the button. I'd shoot to the surface, and then hopefully come out of the surface. All very kind of Marvel Avengers. It would look really cool. Underwater Iron Man. So what I should add is that you can see the straps there. I'm wearing a day sack with the battery packs for these thrusters, which is kind of like the equivalent of a couple of car batteries on your back. So you are a little bit negatively buoyant, to say the least. So picture the scene, if you will. I'm at 20 meters on a breath hold. Give the wink to the cameraman. Now, the cameramen, you know, they've got a lot going on. They're looking at the white balance. They're trying to frame it, make sure it's in focus, which is quite hard in the water. White balance is good. The light's right. They're getting the right action. They're going to move with me. So he was unaware that I was drowning in front of him. So I realized he's going to be of no help at all. So I pushed off. I'm trying to breaststroke back to the surface with this, like, 2 car batteries in my back. Just made it, there's a shot that never made the edit, of my hand coming out the swimming pool and, like, grabbing the side of the pool by, like, 2 fingers and hauling myself up. And as always happens in telly, and the director and the cameraman's there, camera in your face, and they're like, right, Andy, give us a line to camera. And I turned to the camera, and needless to say, what I said to camera was not broadcastable on children's BBC. So we'll go back in time a little bit now to 2012, actually. And this was Operation Iceberg, which was a joint sort of filming and science expedition. It was the BBC and Discovery US, as well as glaciologists from universities from Canada and America and the UK, out looking at the life cycle of an iceberg. So from its conception up as part of the glacier to its kind of birth as an iceberg, the calving front of the glacier, and then its eventual kind of floats out to sea, the Arctic Ocean, eventually breaks up and melts and dies. We did an awful lot of diving on this 6-week expedition, including on the glacier, diving the blue lakes. These are beautiful, beautiful things which you can only get to by helicopter, which you know, is a very cool way to arrive at a dive site, I have to say. And as you fly over them, the 24-hour summer Arctic sun is beating down, and they're indentations in the glacier that are filled by meltwater, so the water is crystal, crystal clear. So what you find is, because again the lake bed effectively is pure white as well, is that the sunlight reflects through that. You get this myriad of different shades of blue, from in the shallow areas, the kind of, you know, an electric azure blue, and then the deeper parts, like in these holes, this kind of quite dark indigo kind of blue, and all shades in between. And some of the guys, we're going to dive on these blue holes, myself and the cameraman, who's Doug Allen, who's a friend of mine. I'd done a lot of safety work for Doug, and this was our first trip when I was in front of his camera. And some of the guys in the shoot hadn't really done Arctic work before or dive shoots before. So this is Dave, the sound man, an absolutely lovely, lovely bloke, but we're filming this sort of scene of me getting kitted up. And Dave's there, you know, and I was like, Dave, can you just take a few paces back, please? Please. And he's like, I need to get the sound for this, mate. Sorry. It's like, Dave, you just need to take a couple of paces back, mate, just please. And he's like, well, mate, look, we've all got jobs to do here. I didn't expect you to be such a diva that you'd want me to back off when you're trying to get kit kick. I mean, just, like, you know, let's just get on with the job. No, Dave, it's 0 degrees in that water, and you're standing on my dry suit in your crampons. Luckily, it didn't put any holes in it, because the water was 0 degrees, but crystal clear. So that's Doug's already in, that's me jumping in into the lake. So the idea was that these lakes empty, catastrophically usually. What will happen is the glacier moves, a crevasse will open at the bottom, effectively a plug hole, and the lake will empty. Sometimes these many kilometre square lakes will empty with about 10 times the power of Niagara Falls. So what we're going to do, we're going to put a little sensor on the bottom of the lake, which fed up to a piece of science equipment, which would measure how this thing was emptying, but also to a camera, time-lapse camera, which would record the actual this event for telly. I should say that that's us. So our bubbles, we're using scuba on this because, you know, rebreathers and mixed gases were pointless. It was shallow dives to sort of 30 meters max. And on an expedition like this, it's much easier just to take a compressor and dive on scuba on air for the whole trip. And our bubbles are somewhat disturbing the surface there, but it was gin clear. And at 14-meter ledge where we are there, the supervisor could actually read the labels on our sets, on our cylinders. That's how good the viz was. So here's a little clip. And I'm going to make use of the sofa.
It's absolutely beautiful down here. All these shades of white and blue. I'm gonna try and place this sensor here.
The sensor will now record any change in depth.
Let's have a bit of an exploring. See if we can find where this plug hole is, eh?
So a couple of things to note there. One was the 3mm polypropylene line that we were tied to the surface with. That was a BBC Health and Safety thing for our safety in case the lake emptied. Now, how much use a bit of 3mm polypropylene rope will be against 10 times the power of Niagara Falls? I don't know, not my call. Wasn't convinced personally. The other thing is that the sensor, which was designed to sit at the bottom of this lake, designed by these top, globally top-level scientists, floated, which was a bit of a problem. So all sorts of ideas were mooted around about, we could create a cradle out of ice screws in the bottom of the lake and put it on there. I think it was Doug said, why don't we just tie it to a rock? So the helicopter flew back to camp. We were camping on this mountain ridge back at where the calving front of the glacier to pick up a rock and bring it back. That is the most expensively transported rock in the world. And then we just tied it with a bit of string. And then, I went off to try and find the plug hole.
Oh. Doug, there's a big cave here going straight down. Just gonna have a look.
This could be the lake's plug hole. For Andy, it's a challenge he can't resist.
It's pretty dark in here. It's definitely getting narrower. No way. It's getting too tight. It's getting away.
So you'll notice there that the footage from inside the little cave was taken on a GoPro, which was actually sat there and pointing kind of down that way. Doug didn't follow me in. We got to the surface, and Doug was like, Andy, what the bloody hell you think you're doing getting in that cave? I was like, it's fine, mate. It wasn't a problem. I know what I'm doing. I said, besides, Doug, you told me to go in the cave. I was like, no, I didn't. I went, yeah, mate. You were doing this and pointing. And I was like, well, if Doug Allen tells you to get in the hole, then you get in the hole. He's like, no, because it turns out, you see, that obviously Doug can see me perfectly because he's looking at a viewfinder there, so he's seen everything in front of the camera and he can see me quite clearly. There's a big camera here, right, which is covering this part of his body. So apparently what he was doing was this. And I was like, Doug, you do know that I can't see your head. So we left the glacier, we went out to the Arctic Ocean, we looked at icebergs, and we were diving down the side and around and under these big icebergs. One of the problems we faced was these spectacular animals, the polar bear, the world's largest land carnivore. Now, I don't want to demonize wildlife, but at the same time, you have to be realistic and respectful, and these polar bears do eat people. Simple as that. We are easy prey to them. So one of the problems we had is Doug would find a perfect dive site. You go, right, this is good here. The ice looks nice. The light's in the right place. Right, we'll dive here. And then a polar bear would pop its nose over the top. Because the iceberg we were kind of mainly situated around was actually an ice island because it was 5 kilometers by 5 kilometers. So it's a 25 square kilometer iceberg. And Chris Packham at the beginning did a quick helicopter survey of the area and counted 25 polar bears on the iceberg. A biblical infestation of polar bears, hence we had this problem quite a few times. And one of the researchers said, well, look, it's fine because the polar bears have only been recorded diving to 25 meters after seals. So as long as you're deeper than 25 meters, you'll be fine. And I was like, that's what they've been recorded at. Again, what they're doing when scientists start watching, we get no idea. However, give me a thought. I thought, as long as I'm always deeper than Doug, I'll probably be all right. That's why most of the footage is like down there. We did a few other in-water things, not quite diving, but my friend Chris Van Tulken, who's a TV presenter and a doctor, if you've got kids, he does Operation Ouch on CBC, which has been running for like 7 years now. Great guy, bit of a mental man, and he came up with a great idea to look at cold water shock response, because cold water shock response is actually quite bad survival-wise, because it's that uncontrolled gasping reflex you get if you jump into cold water. Which is bad if your mouth is underwater or close to the water line. Now, so he figured that as a cold water diver, I would be better able to kind of control that response than he was. So his experiment was based around us jumping into the Arctic Ocean, which, because it's salt water near an iceberg, is -1 on the surface, and he decided to do that in our pants. Yeah, so here is a cold water diver jumping into the Arctic Ocean. It is as bad as it looks. Not a bad effort, not a bad effort if I do say so myself, and now we have the non-diver.
Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Score 1 for the dive tribe. So it's not always been that cold. Most of the diving I seem to do is dark and cold. There's plenty of really good underwater presenters out there, like Miranda and Monty. They tend to wheel me in when it's like really deep technical stuff or cave stuff. I'm like the, like the laboratory monkey they fire into space when they can't use a proper human being. But occasionally I get to go somewhere nice. So this was in 2016 on the 100th anniversary of the sinking of Britannic. And we're out filming in June in Key Island in Greece, and it was like 16 degrees in the bottom at 120 meters, 20 degrees in the surface, the water, and obviously out on top side it was like 38 degrees Celsius. Now I'm from the Highlands of Scotland, so 38 to me is, barbaric. And in telly, everything takes a long time. It takes like 5 takes if you're gonna film you getting kitted up. So it can take 2 hours to literally get kitted up on TV. So you spend most of the day, or most of the morning, stood in your dry suit and undersuit, taking on and off your rebreather, which is great if you're in the water, very nice and warm, but obviously at 38 degrees Celsius, you're borderline heat stroke. So it's not always, mind you, that's quite impressive, is that basically someone paid for me to go to Greece for 10 days and dive Britannic, and I've still managed to find something to complain about. That's pretty good going. So for those who aren't familiar with Britannic, Britannic was the twin sister of Titanic. In fact, the improved twin sister, because when Titanic sank, she was still being built, and they actually improved her sort of anti-sinking capabilities. That's her. She was never used as an ocean liner. She was commissioned straight into World War I, where she was used as a hospital ship, taking injured troops back from the Mediterranean in conflicts like Gallipoli. Now, she did sink, but to be fair, because people go, oh God, I've done it again, she was actually much improved, and she sank because she hit a German sea mine, which was a device specifically designed to sink battleships, so she didn't stand much of a chance. And to dive this, as I say, she now sits in the Aegean Sea off the coast of Greece in 400 feet, 120 meters of water. And the dive boat we had to dive from was the best I will ever dive from. This is a hell of a liveaboard. It's a big scientific research vessel, and it had on it a 1-man sub, a 3-man sub, a massive ROV, which is all very, very handy because one of the big problems you have in deep diving or cave diving or mine diving, it's dark down there. And trying to light things up is always usually the most sort of technical part of the exercise. When you try to light parts of a 900-foot-long massive shipwreck, it becomes very difficult. But we had these subs, these ROVs, to help us. We used them basically as floating light platforms to put the big headlights on, you'll see in a second, and illuminate this massive wreck. It also this, which is a wet bell, which made decompression much, much easier. You could go inside the bell, and it had all this spare bailout gas on it, not just the silver bottles, but these are actually bailout J bottles, these huge big yellow bottles here, full of bailout gas. Because the dive, if we planned an hour dive at 120 meters, you're looking at about 6 or 7 hours of deco. But you could surface inside this air bell within the bell, take your loop out, because we're using rebreathers, and chat. And the plan was, this was on a test dive, the plan was to conduct interviews with other divers in the bell during decompression. So that, coupled with the fact that I had an iPod, which was rated to 90 meters, with some audiobooks on there, I thought, 7 hours of deco, not a problem. The problem we had was that the winds and the currents around Britannic can be quite bad, and we were there for 7 days and never got to set sail once. We got permission to extend for another 3 days, and then the budget was gone. Day 8 came, nothing. Day 9 came, nothing. Day 10 came, and we got out over the wreck. However, the current was beginning to get quite strong. And all morning, the skipper was like, no, no diving, no diving, no diving. And I kind of had consoled myself with the fact that I was going to miss out diving Britannic. And then after lunch, he said, okay, there's a chance, get kitted up. We got kitted up, we sat there in the shade for about an hour, because we figured if he gives the nod, we're all getting in. That's it. And about 2 in the afternoon, the skipper said, it's borderline, but go for it. And we literally, the 4 of us, like with rebreathers and stage, ran off this boat before he could change his mind and got in the water.
Ready? Let's go. Okay, launch.
Everything changes as we leave the world of air and enter the ocean. Deep sea diving is the closest thing on Earth to exploring outer space. This line will guide us to Britannic. The subs and the robot cameras will light our way in the darkness when we're 400 feet down. And then, out of the gloom, she appears. Britannic. And that's what she looks like today. She's an impressive shipwreck, to 900 foot long, and the level of preservation is incredible. Titanic's kind of fallen apart these days, but Britannic is still very intact, and even at a sort of minute level, you can look inside the bridge, and then the captain's cabin, the bath's still there, with the plug's still in, and the taps are all there intact, and you can look in the medical room and see all the medical supplies that was used to treat the troops. And even the telegraph, that thing that you might have seen in films where they go sort of full ahead and stop and full astern, is still there. The glass panel, completely intact, not a crack in it, and you can dust off and see the writing in mint condition beneath. It's in great, great condition. And as I say, we used these big subs. This is a screenshot from the video. We used the subs to light up this massive, massive shipwreck. But with the filming all done, it was time to return to the surface. So we went back to the wet bell. It's going to be great, get ourselves ready. First thing that happened was that I got to my iPod and the battery had fried. So, oh, God, okay, well, we can still do the interviews. That'll kill a bit of time in the shallows. But unfortunately, the current had picked up to such an extent on the surface that the steel wire ropes that were raising and lowering the wet bell had become all fangled up, and it locked up about 70 meters up. So to exit that, the 4 divers exited that. We had to climb back up the shot line, all the way to do all our deco. And by 20 meters, the current was ripping. You're basically hanging on there like a flag in the breeze for about 4 hours, waiting for your deco to tick down. Luckily, all experienced divers, we had john lines. We must have clipped ourselves on and just sort of hang there, but still, it's a lot of hours just to hang in the breeze. And finally, you surface, and there is inevitably a camera stuck right in your face. So you can crawl on board. Top tip if you're doing it, what you need to do is you don't just pull your mask off and give a piece of camera. What you do is you pull your mask off a little bit, and then you wipe all the pints of snotter that has gained in the bottom of your mask, because 7 hours in the water, you're going to have that. Then, put your mask back on, and then take your mask and hood off in a one eye and do the whole Timothy advert thing, and then give you a piece of camera. Look a bit more presentable. I mean, you're still pretty unpresentable. It's like big mask mark, face all puffed up. And the director wanted me to give this closing line to the whole sort of episode. And the whole episode is about, not so much about the shipwreck, but about the people on the shipwreck, the people, the nurses and the doctors and the stokers and the crew and the injured soldiers that kind of lived and worked on the ship and what that represented. And I gave this one line. It was all it just encapsulated the whole thing perfectly, and it was delivered. It was the best delivery I've ever done a line. There was no pauses. It was beautiful. And the director was like, "Oh my God, Andy." A bit more surprised than he should be. He was like, "Man, that was absolutely perfect. That was great, mate. That's awesome." But what he didn't figure was that I had nothing to do for the last 7 hours than write that right line, rewrite it, and then rehearse it and rehearse it and rehearse it. The most rehearsed line in television history. That's what 7 hours of deco will do for you. However, I finally got to dive Britannic on literally the last few hours of the trip. And it was significant. It was the 11th of June, which is significant because it's the birthday of 2 people who have dived Britannic. One is Jacques Cousteau, who you may have heard of, and the other one is me. I dived it on my birthday, and that's the birthday card the other guys made for me. On how they managed to make that whilst hanging on to shortly with one hand in the breeze and trying to write this birthday card, I don't know. I've also done a lot of stuff for the One Show over the years, and that's a great opportunity because normally the sort of people who will watch diving programs are divers or maybe people who are interested in underwater history. The One Show is very much, Joe Public is the person in the street. So these people, have got no real concept of diving in rebreathers and scuba gear. And it's worth saying actually at this point that we forget that within this community, everything's relative to people you know. So if you're a PADI open water diver, you might think, well, I'm right in the bottom rung. And within the community, I understand that, but 99.9% of the population of this country don't dive. And they look at you as a PADI open water diver and they think you are awesome. You are an underwater explorer, you are an aquanaut. So don't, remember that, within this small bubble of the diving world, PADI open water might not sound that great, but to the rest of the world, you are an underwater superhero. So I get a chance to have done things like cave dive in Wookie Hole, recreating the 1935 dive in an old standard kit. Very much not designed for cave diving. Forget trim and buoyancy. You literally crawl along the mud bottom on your hands and knees, but a lot of fun. And even get to do stuff like this, which is cave diving in a mine in Wales.
After more than 4 hours of preparation, it's time to go in. Following a safety line, we make the descent in stages. But as soon as we get down to 25 meters, it's breathtaking. I can clearly see the tracks leading down into the tunnel. And the flatbed trucks, just like the ones Elizabeth would have travelled down on. The steam engine and its now broken drive belt would have powered the haulage lifts. Gear wheels would have formed part of the winch to lift the slabs of slate onto the trucks. And then I come across something much more poignant. Written on the walls are names: E. Hughes, 1938, Ted, and the initials ETJ. These are probably the names of the rockmen who were once in charge of drilling and blasting specific parts of the quarry. The tally marks would have been their way of keeping track of each truckload of slate sent to the surface. I've found more than I could have hoped for. As visibility deteriorates, we decide to call it a day.
What I like about doing the One Show is that it gives me an opportunity to show people, not divers, because divers can go and access this, but people who will never normally get to see this part of the world, the caves, the deep oceans, the mines. It's a chance to kind of show them the world that we all, not take for granted, we can all experience and they never will, and that is a privilege. So before I finish, I'll speak about a couple of projects recently that weren't actually on TV, but they're kind of independent projects. One is this. It's Dive Odyssey. It was the brainchild of a mad Finnish guy called Jani Sahunen. It's a 10-minute sort of abstract sci-fi kind of fantasy film. It's an homage really to Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. And it had myself and Gemma Smith as Gemma was playing an underwater explorer and I was playing an underwater alien creature. So I was in a silver suit and silver JJ rebreather and she was in a completely orange kit. And there's a big crew on this. So we had 2 cameramen and then about 7 other people lighting this huge mine system in Finland called the Jamo Mines, these huge big chambers, some of them as big as this hall. So it takes a lot of lights to light that. So you'd have all these top world-class divers like Sami Pakarinen and Rich Stevenson's there, and Yanni himself and Phil Short, all lighting and watching myself and Gemma as we're trying to do this thing. We had to kind of dance around each other. Big man, this is about 70 meters depth and 500, 600, 700 meters inside the mine system in 2-degree water in winter in Finland. So it's pretty hardcore diving. And then stop, and then just got to stare into her eyes and then beckon her towards me like that. And obviously, you're looking at your mate's eyes as you're trying to do this, and it's very, very hard not to piss yourself laughing, which is like what happened to both of us. So our masks are filled with water, bubbles coming out everywhere, our buoyancy's all going to rats like that. And all these people are all these top-level divers look at these 2 idiots going, what are they doing? But it is worth watching. It's quite a cool little film. Cinematically looks fantastic. We also did a 360 film out in Rossel, one of the probably most famous cave dives in France. So out in Rossel, we did a 360 film for Sunto, and that's viewable. If you go along, they've got the Oculus Go headsets, and you can go kind of cave diving in Rossel for those who want to go at sort of a slightly drier, warmer, safer form of cave diving. But I want to finish on mentioning the Cave of Skulls. Now, this was 2010. It was my first foray into TV diving. In fact, my first foray into TV. It's the first thing I ever did in front of a camera in television. And it was a project I was going to do anyway. I was sort of exploring the Cave of Skulls in Scotland, a bit of caving, a bit of sump diving on my own. A friend of mine called Stu Keasley came up to take some photographs and to do a bit of filming on topside. And then in the cave and in the wet parts, I self-filmed with literally a little rubbishy handycam, not even a GoPro. It was less good than a GoPro. Shots like this, that's a self-shot thing with just left the camera on the rocks and then put a dive light up to one side. And again, as you can see, this is clearly pretty amateur footage of me crawling out of what's called a letterbox. I've got no helmet on because my helmet wouldn't fit into the hole. That's why my helmet's off. And you do this to gain access to the first sump. My point is this. I get asked an awful lot about how to get into, either diving or adventure media. Be that, filming and telly, or be it doing safety stuff, be it as a cameraman, doing it for the web, doing it as writing or speaking. And I was asked a few years ago at an outdoor show, and this guy goes, what's the secret to making a living from kind of adventures and exploration and adventure media? And I was like, I asked the same question years and years ago. I looked at guys like, climbers like Leo Holdy and people like that, and go, how can you make a living from this? What's the secret? And it sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true. Right, here it is. There is no secret. There isn't one. And it took me years to realize that great revelation. There isn't one. The guys out there doing it might not be the best. I'm not the best diver, presenter, speaker, writer in the world by a long, long means. I simply got off my arse and went and did it. And that's the difference. The people out there doing it are the ones out there doing it because they're the ones that got out there and did it. I mean, Amelia Earhart said the best way of doing something is to do something. So if you're thinking about getting to this, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Don't wait until you've got the perfect idea and the perfect kit. Just go out there and just start. You'll make mistakes, you'll learn things, but you'll make contacts, and you'll start building a body of work and a bit of credibility that people will want to start supporting you into bigger and better things. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, I've got a couple of minutes, but I will just say that the best way to contact me, because I'm a bit rubbish on social media and everything else, but I do Instagram, so if you've got any questions, or you want to just DM me on Instagram, and I get back to, as far as I know, every person who messages me via Instagram. Facebook and Twitter, I'm not so good at handling, because I can't cope with 3 different platforms, basically. I'm just having the time. So that's the best way to get in contact. Apart from that, thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you. And we've got about 2 minutes for questions, if anyone has any questions. Yes?
I suffer with, I went snorkeling last month.
Yep.
And I had a panic attack. What's the best way of getting rid of my panic attacks in the sea?
So the question was about getting rid of panic attacks in the sea. Whew, probably not the best man to ask for that, but I think the thing else, certainly I found, the more you do something, and the more you, in fact, the Army Parachute School, which taught me when I was a paratrooper, their motto is knowledge dispels fear. I think the more you can learn about something, the better. So potentially learning about why you're having a panic attack, but I mean, like physically, chemically, but also what's bringing it on. Is it the sort of almost vertigo of deep blue water? Is it the wildlife? Is it is it sharks? Okay, well, there's 2 years ago in this one, don't dive anywhere with sharks, Stony Cove, for example. Secondly, I would say learn more about sharks and shark behavior, because you can safely dive with sharks. You can safely dive with sharks if you know the right sharks to dive with at the right time, and looking out for the behavior that can indicate if they're getting a little bit annoyed at you, you just exit the water. Another thing I'd say, the more you do something, the less frightening it becomes. I mean, first started skydiving, frankly, it is terrifying. You jump out of a plane at 15,000 feet. It's not a normal thing to do. After 50 jumps, you don't start getting nervous till like a few minutes before exit. By 100 jumps, you're pretty cool there. By 500 jumps, it's like, yeah, I'll see the boat. Yeah, cool. And you step out, and that's not because I'm more blasé. I'm still as dangerous, so I'm still switched on to the dangers and checking my equipment and all that sort of stuff, my drills. However, you get an appreciation of what's really going on, and I think you can therefore have a great ability to kind of suppress that. In the case of skydiving, because skydiving is actually very, very, very safe, genuinely very safe. You can suppress that, in that case, unrealistic fear. I mean, snorkeling isn't dangerous. It shouldn't be dangerous. You know, if you're just doing, you know, with a buddy. So I'd say I'd do more snorkeling. I'd learn about more about sharks, and then actually I would go shark diving. If I were you, that'd be my plan. I'm sure there's Holly people here who can provide. Right, we've got 1 minute left. We've got one more question. Go on. Sketchiest dive. Sketchiest. Oh my God, it's been. How long have you got? We're all day. Okay, I've only almost drowned a couple of times. And once was in the army. We're doing deepish diving, we're doing deep air diving. So we're doing 50-meter dives with helmets with surface supplies, so big yellow helmets. And we're doing training bomb disposal stuff. So we're doing some trainee demolition stuff, which actually wasn't the scary bit. The problem was at one point. You come down the shot line and your working line goes out, which is a sort of 10-meter line to the job. And we're not really sure, but we think like a bit of grit or a stone that got lodged in the mushroom valve. So basically, long and short of it is, the helmet started filling up. And I lost comms to surface because the mic is now underwater. I could hear surface calling me, and I couldn't get up, and it was actually filling up, and I thought, right. And at that point, Tim, you couldn't self-rescue. We just didn't have any buoyancy, really. You did a little bit of air for your suit to take off the squeeze. But you had lead boots on and a lead waistcoat and a massive helmet, so you were stuck to the bottom, which is great for working, not very good if you try to swim back to the surface. It was 50 meters, you're on air. I'd have probably been bent anyway. And I thought, oh, this is pretty bad. And the only thing I could do, I turned, and I ran towards the shot line. But the position I was running at was almost like this, because it's almost like being in space with that sort of kit. And it must have dislodged, because as I stood up against the shot line, the helmet just emptied. And I had a now very irate sergeant, and they're going, "Diver Torbet, are you well?" I was like, "Diver well?" I then went back to work, because there's no way I wasn't, I was going to go, "No, I'm coming up." So that was a pretty dodgy little moment in diving. Right, that's it, folks. Let's say I'll be around the rest of the show. Come and grab me. I'm at the free diving stage at 1:05. Kids zone at 2:30. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you very much.